Hi.
You're Ruth Lane,
Yes.
and we're here in your home in Hurricane, Utah.
Yes.
And I'm Karen Horseman, and with me is Leah Greathead. And we've explained to you that we're lawyers with the Ministry of Attorney General in British Columbia. Is that right?
Yes, and it's very good to have you again.
This is our second visit.
Yes.
And we've explained to you that our purpose in talking to you is because we're about to have what's called a reference into the constitutionality of the polygamy prohibition in our criminal code.
Yes.
And we've been talking to a number of people who've had experiences living in polygamous communities, and you've kindly agreed to talk to us about your experiences. And we've explained to you that our position on this reference will be to uphold the law. You understand that?
Yes.
I'm not saying it's your position, but you understand that's our position.
Yes.
Ruth, maybe we could just start by having you explain where you were born and what your family situation was growing up.
Okay. I was born in Colorado City, Arizona. When I grew up, my dad had 2 wives at one time. I loved growing up out there. It's great when you're young and being a child. It's nice living in a closed community where you feel safe. That's one of the great things about it.
And Colorado City, that was what we know of as an FLDS community, is that right?
Yes.
And maybe you could just explain, for the benefit of those of us listening to the tape who might not know exactly what that means, what the FLDS is as an organization?
FLDS is basically your Mormon church gone fundamentalist. It's basically tried to stay true to the roots, and it still believes in polygamy. We believe in the fundamentals that Mormonism was based on.
And so polygamy was practiced in Colorado City when you were growing up?
Absolutely.
And did you live in Colorado City for all of your childhood?
I grew up there until I was 17. I left for a short while. I ended up getting pregnant, and I came back home because that was where I wanted to raise my child. After my baby was almost 2, I asked to marry Winston Blackmore and married him and moved to Canada.
I'm going to slow you down on a few of those points.
Okay.
So when you were growing up in Colorado City, you said your dad had 2 wives, is
Yes.
that right? And how many siblings did you have that were full biological siblings?
13. No,
Okay.
wait. It's 11.
Is 11 plus you, so your mother had 12 children?
Yes.
And your dad's second wife, how many kids?
She had 3.
She had 3. And so growing up, you grew up in a house of do my math, 15 children, is that right?
Yes.
And where were you in terms of the age range of the kids?
Kind of the middle. Pretty much in the middle.
And when you were growing up in Colorado City, what were you taught about marriage?
We were taught that God knew who you were to marry, and it's called placement marriage. And God would tell our prophet, at the time it was Roland Jeffs, as I was a young lady, that he would tell him, and then he would tell us, and that if we really truly believed in the whole FLDS and believed in God, and that's what we would accept and do, is what the prophet told us to do.
And did you have any sort of idea growing up about what age you might expect to be when this was going to happen?
When I grew up, the average age was somewhere between 21 and 25.
For the females?
For the females. Before my time, when my mom got married, it was somewhat younger than that. It's between 16 and 18. So I think as the times changed and as Roland evolved, he was actually the one that upped the marriage age between 21 and 25.
And we've heard about a city that I understand to be related to Colorado City called Hilldale. Was that another polygamous community?
It's basically the same community. They're just twin cities that right on the border. So the side that's Utah is Hilldale, Utah. The side that's Colorado City is Colorado City, Arizona.
And the community of Bountiful, were you aware of the existence of Bountiful as you were growing up?
More so as I grew into my teenage years.
And did you understand that the people who lived in Bountiful practiced the same kind of religion as you did in the
Yes.
community of Colorado City?
Yes, they would all come down a couple of times a year for what's called conference, and we'd all get together. Their leaders would talk in church, and that's pretty much how we kind of knew about them.
And when you were growing up again, sticking to the period of time before you left, what was education like in Colorado City for you?
We actually had a public school. However, saying that public school was probably 98% FLDS. So, it had to meet the criteria of whatever public schools are, but it was pretty much run by the FLDS and attended by the FLDS.
And so when we were talking about what you were taught about marriage growing up in the FLDS, are those lessons that you learned in school or at home or both?
At home and church, Sunday school, and I'm sure we talked about them between the children. I don't remember any teachers ever talking openly in class about those kind of things.
And so you said that you were 17 when you left Colorado City for a short while.
Yes.
And where did you go?
I had a sister that had previously left, and I lived with her for a short while, and then I met a boy also from Colorado City and hooked up with him.
And then you indicated that you got pregnant.
Yes.
Right. And when you say you went home, does that mean you went back to
my father's house
in Colorado City?
Yes.
And what was the reaction of your parents when you came back?
I told you so. Pretty much the standard reaction of any parent that's going to have a teenage daughter come home. Very disappointed. Very glad to have me back in the fold. At the time, Fred Jessup was our bishop, and he was actually very kind and very good to me, being back in the community and pregnant.
Before you left and up until the age of 17, were there a lot of opportunities for a young woman in Colorado City to have experiences with boys, to date and that sort of thing?
Not openly, no, not openly. We kind of all, as we were going to school and being naughty, we had our boyfriends and whatnot, but it was always, if you got caught, you might have to get married, because if you were having relations with a boy, then you would either have to get married or get kicked out. If you got married, it wouldn't be under the marriage covenant. You would have to just be married and kind of prove yourself, so to speak, for a while.
Can you explain to us the marriage covenant?
The marriage covenant is pretty much the same as you would do if you were a Mormon going to the temple. It's a promise that we make for time and all eternity to be sealed to this person for time and all eternity. So in the eyes of the FLDS, I would still belong to my ex-husband because I'm sealed to him regardless of whether I left him or not.
And so does that mean that, I'll call it a legal marriage, but a marriage where you would go and get a marriage certificate and the marriage would be recognized by the government, did that have something of a lesser status than a covenant marriage within the FLDS?
Well, yeah, because that's only for time. It's not near as cool.
So the covenant marriage went beyond your life on earth.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you said that there were placement marriages, is I think what you called them, where the prophet let you know who it was you were going to marry, in your experience, was it typical for the girls in particular to have any say in who it was that they would marry?
Some did and some didn't. A lot of what I saw, and more so after I was married than anything to confirm it, depended on the family. Depended on where the father stood in his relationship with the prophet and how open he was to listening to his daughter. Some men, my dad was one of them. He always taught us, pretty much the fundamentals of what we believed in, but at the end of the day, he told us very, very clearly that if there was ever anybody we didn't agree with, he would stand by us on it.
So it was kind of partly a function of the personality of your father and partly a function of how influential he might be with the prophet.
Yes.
And so you'd moved back in with your parents when you were 17 and pregnant, and did that status, having had sexual relations outside of a marriage, did that impact your status in the community?
Oh, I'm so lucky I ever got married. It's a miracle I ever got married, and especially to a church leader. That in itself is a miracle.
Can you tell us how that came about, your marriage to Winston?
I asked for him. One of his younger wives, I knew her really well before she married him. And after she married him, we were in contact quite a bit. And I had what you might call a spiritual experience where I felt like that's where my child belonged and that I belonged, that I would fit in.
Had you had your child at this point in time?
Yes, he was almost 2 by the time I married Winston.
Okay. And when you say you asked for him, did you ask your father or the prophet, or who?
I actually asked the prophet.
And that was No1 at the time?
Yes.
And were you in Colorado City at that time?
Yes.
And where was Winston?
He was Canada. He lived in Canada.
Was he the bishop at the time?
Yes, the bishop.
And where did you marry him, and what were the circumstances of the marriage?
Crazy. Crazy. My parents were mad that I'd asked for him, and he'd married 2 sisters the week before, which I didn't know that when I asked for him. I probably still would have asked for him though. So I ended up driving back to Canada with him. We stopped in Salt Lake and got married on our way to Canada and headed on up to Canada.
So just, if I can get the timing straight then, between the time you asked the prophet to marry Winston and the time you actually got married?
About a week.
And you said that two weeks before that, Winston had married 2 sisters?
A week.
Oh,
actually, okay. It was probably 2 weeks before that I asked to marry him, and then he married the girls a week later, and then I married him a week after that.
And you hadn't known that he was going to marry the 2 sisters?
No.
Did you know them?
As acquaintances, yes.
Were they from Colorado City?
Yes.
And had you met Winston before?
Not formally, no. I'd heard him speak in church. I knew the gal that was married to him, and I had several friends that really thought he was just wonderful, because he was younger than most of the people that talked in church and very charismatic.
And how old was Winston when you had asked to marry him?
He was born in 56 and I married him in 94. So
one of us has to do math.
I don't want to do math. He's in his 40s.
Okay.
He's basically 17 years older than I am, though.
All right. And when you drove up from Colorado City, you said you stopped in Salt Lake City, and that's where you and Winston got married.
Yes.
Who married you there?
Will and Jess.
And it was a covenant marriage, as you've described it?
Yes.
And was there anything additional or special that you had to do because you'd had the child out of wedlock before this happened?
He actually had to ask every one of his women permission to marry me because it was a different circumstance, whereas the other girls he married, they were placed with him, and so they didn't necessarily, the other women didn't necessarily have any say in that. They just got married. They might have known about it, but they didn't really have any say.
So you were the only wife where the other wives had to actually consent to
Yes.
Winston's marriage. And how many wives did he have at the time he married you, Ruth?
I was number 10, so he had 9.
And that included the 2 sisters?
Yes.
And were they on the drive with you up from Colorado
All
City?
3 of us.
So Winston arrived home with 3 new wives?
3 new wives and a baby.
And what was the living situation in Bountiful when you arrived?
Cramped.
Can you describe kind of physically what the layout was and who was living where?
Well, each one of the moms had their own bedroom, so to speak. Some of the moms with a little bit more children maybe had 2 bedrooms or, more. I had a really teeny tiny bedroom that me and my son stayed in. And a lot of the mothers, they had 1 bedroom that they had 1 or 2 children in with them. So it was very tight. for space.
Was it one house that you were all living in?
There was 2 houses at the time I got married. Shortly after, in that same year, they built another big house, and then the year, I'm trying to remember how long it took to get the other big house after that. Another year or 2 after that, the other house was built.
And what year was this happening in?
94.
In 94.
End of 94.
And do you remember how many other kids were living there as Winston's children from his previous wives when you first arrived?
Jane had, I want to say 7. I don't want to do the math. Jane had 7. Chris had 4. Marge and Sharon both had 2, almost 3. Marianne had 3.
A lot.
Susan had 2. I had 1. Well, there's quite a few small ones.
And what was the sort of domestic arrangements? I mean, did you have agreement between the wives as to how cooking would get done and childcare would get done and that sort of thing?
We just kind of sort of integrated into where we were needed at the time. The first couple of years for me were golden. They were ideal. Everybody, we had a lot of fun until we all started having kids and getting more cramped.
And then did some of the stresses come out of having that many people in a small space?
Well, we got more wives, and then you start having more children. Women get along pretty good until their children start stressing each other, and if you don't like somebody else's child, and it can get stressful.
And how many? So you're number 10 when
Yes.
you arrived, Winston's 10th wife, and that was in 1994. When did the 11th wife arrive?
95. January, February 95.
So was that a few months after your
About
marriage?
2 months after I got married.
And who was the 11th wife?
My sister. My little sister. Can we pause this?
Yeah, no, just
What do you need, Beebs?
you know,